Well, welcome everyone, and to the latest in our series of Meet the Students, an occasional series put on by the Centre for Research in Quaker Studies at Woodbrooke, where we interview recent graduates from our MA and PhD program. My name's Ben Pink Dandelion. I'm the program leader for research at Woodbrooke, and it's a great pleasure this afternoon to be in conversation with Penelope Cummins, who I had the pleasure of supervising. And Penelope, I see your thesis was 2020. I can't quite believe that. And of course, there's this really strange situation where we were meeting every month, and then suddenly we don't see each other. So anyway, it's particularly lovely to see you again today. So welcome. Um, so you finished in 2020. Can you remember when you began?
It was a long time ago. Um, I trickled along really up to the wire, I think. I absolutely had to submit at the end
Okay.
um, because I'd done what a lot of people do. I thought I've got forever,
Mm.
and then suddenly realized that I didn't. And one of the easiest things to do in a PhD is to procrastinate. And I honed my skills in procrastination, which was very stupid. I'm really lucky that just before the end, I didn't get some dread disease or, you know, um, viral plague or whatever, because um, I hadn't given myself that leeway. Sensible people do.
Well, if you had a done, we could have got you a leave of absence. The university's kind of, understands that life gets in the way sometimes. But that probably means it probably would be because a part-time PhD is 6 to 8 years. So
Mm.
yeah, maybe it was the 8 years. So you finished, I mean, talking about viral plagues, I mean, you finished in 2020, which in my memory is the year of the pandemic and lockdown. And did you kind of avoid that in a sense? In terms of finishing a degree or
Well, by the time um, lockdown started, I was immersed in writing up, and it was in some ways a blessing that I had no opportunities to do other things.
okay,
And also, my Viva was during lockdown.
okay,
And that was really interesting because it's, I can get very nervous, but it's really hard to get nervous when you're sitting at your own dining room table
hmm
and you're looking out at your own back garden and at the flowers in the kitchen. And also, at that stage, doing things on Zoom was new to all of us. And
mm,
my two examiners, um, I think, were also slightly off balance. And it ended up being the most warm and friendly conversation. It was absolutely lovely.
good.
Um, so I think there was a bit of an advantage, really.
Okay, maybe there's something that there's kind of leveling about all being on Zoom, especially with, as you say, what was quite new technology for some people then, and rather than you having to go to a room in the university where people are sitting behind a desk and you're coming in, but
Well, normally I wouldn't recommend it
mm,
because I'm someone who gripes a lot about meetings not being in person. But in that very peculiar season,
mm,
um, it just fell out happily for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
good, good. I mean, the
I,
situation now is that, I mean, all our distance learning students will have their Viva online, um, but campus-based ones, you can choose to have it if you wish to. online or in person. So that's it. Things are constantly changing anyway. So let's go back though to what might be in 2013, 2014. And can you remember, both why you decided to embark on this very long research project and also how you chose your topic? And it may have been the other way around, of course, that you had something you wished to research and then you thought actually this would be the best way to do it.
Well, a lot of my working life, I have been someone who's written reports about things. And I've had thought that I would like to do a PhD, but only under particular circumstances. And actually, when you're busy writing reports in the day job, it's really not great to be doing something different at night. And when I found that I was retired, I kind of had two options. I could have dug deeper into the work, so, some topics that I dealt with at work, and had to fly on from and onto the next thing. And one of them I really should have made into a PhD, and that would have very much changed the rest of my career if I'd done that in my 50s. But I thought, well, that phase of my life is behind me, and the phase that is ahead of me probably includes an awful lot of Quaker stuff, because my life always has done. And so let me go forward. And so did I want to do a PhD? Yes, I'd always felt it was a challenge I hadn't risen to. And then when I was choosing my topic, I was bothered about developments at the time in the Society of Friends. And I thought, well, I can just hold forth at length over the luncheon table. Or I can actually test whether I don't know, I don't want to say definitively right, but am I in the right direction, or am I barking?
Yes.
And so it was in a period where there was a lot of change to the structures of the Religious Society of Friends. And I was worrying that it was becoming more secular and imposing business practices and organizational practices which inhibit theologically God-based decision-making. And I've worked with those organizational practices a lot of my life. And indeed, I've taught them at business schools. And it really did disturb me, the tendency that I thought I was seeing. And so I thought, right, let's do it. And it was actually very good, I think, for my for my good temper, really, that I'd chosen this topic. Because when things happened that I would have really been very upset about, I said, oh, fancy, data, how exciting. This can be a chapter. So that was good for me and my friends, I think. That
Okay. Good. So your research was around the way in which corporate decision making in Britain Yearly Meeting was moving, or the way charity structures had affected it. Can you say a bit more?
Yes, we had, as a result of changes in charity law, we had the way in which Quakers responded was by imposing a layer of trustees. who interpreted that as requiring them to make decisions on behalf of the group.
Okay.
And that wasn't and still isn't my interpretation. And they made some corking decisions, saying explicitly that it was their business, not the business of the rest of the group, including, one example is the £4 million refurbishment of the large meeting house in Friend's house. And then it's renaming as well. And although they said they weren't directly responsible for renaming. And it was indeed that whole process, I think, in this most recent yearly meeting, where the decision was made to do away with meeting for sufferings and to just have the trustees in the yearly meeting, a recurring yearly meeting. I think that has been the culmination of a process that you could say goes back to 1987, actually, but certainly since 2006. And yeah, I have been a voice on the sidelines. I think there's something that has heartened me, has been that my work has sometimes heartened other people. And I was so heartwarmed when a student who finished just this year used my work to take his work a bit further.
Yes.
And that was really nice.
Yes, no, wonderful. Yeah.
But I found it a very difficult topic because I didn't publish much on it. And I've written one journal article for Quaker Studies because it was something that I didn't really want to air the dirty laundry, as it were, in the society. I didn't want to upset people who weren't already upset.
Yes.
Because you actually want to build community, you want to be constructive. You don't want to say, actually, I think things are not happening well. And however, because the process continued, I think, well, maybe I should have been a bit louder a bit earlier, but
I think there's a real tension with explore this in some of these other conversations about being a Quaker looking at Quakerism. But I think for you, from where I was sitting, it was particularly acute because, people had a major investment in some of these decisions. And whilst the academic process does allow you to kind of step back a little bit, like you're saying, oh, here's data rather than, anguish or, it's often difficult to communicate the research findings without kind of poking the nest in some way. So, but I mean, the advantage is that you have obviously now presented an argument with great academic rigor, everything supported and, referenced, and people can then come to this hopefully with an open mind and, delve a bit more into this particular view of what's been happening within Britain Yearly Meeting. I mean, just I don't want to get us to get too much into the topic, but I mean, I suppose some people would say, well, having a recurring yearly meeting looks like it's opening up more decisions to more people, which would counter the sense that uh, power and authority was lying with fewer and fewer people. But I'm sensing you don't share that view.
I completely don't.
Okay.
The advantage of having a meeting for sufferings
Mm-hmm.
is that it used to be 200 odd people, but then it's been cut down to just only 100 odd people
Mm-hmm.
who are required to turn up
Mm.
regularly. And actually, currently, there are more meetings a year of sufferings plus the yearly meeting than there will be.
Yes.
And even so, we only touch very lightly on the surface. And if you're not required to attend a meeting, particularly if it's a Zoom meeting, not a lot of people are going to be that keen.
Right.
And there may be, perhaps during the first year or so, there is at the moment written in the requirement that there will still be people appointed to attend, as used to be the case with the early meetings,
Yes.
so that there is a core of people who do regularly attend. But this opening up to the excited everyone is something that I wish I could believe in.
Okay.
I've been part of a meeting which is less than 50 miles from London, but most people have never been to yearly meeting.
Mm.
And I'm the only unpaid member of that meeting who goes regularly for the whole of the yearly meeting.
Yes.
So I don't think there's going to be an opening up, particularly if, as has been proposed, that there are also fun things associated with those days, because that will just reduce the time available for things. And I think there'll be topics aired, but as they might be at what used to be quarterly meetings,
Mm.
and in a more local way. But the more fun there is, the less time there is for real business. And so then the decisions revert, the real decision making and the planning for the performance, it reverts to the paid staff in particular, and also to trustees.
Yes.
So I actually think it's a centralization of decision making, possibly to paid staff to a greater extent than I've been prepared to acknowledge.
Okay. Okay. Just because people are needing to be informed, and yeah, I mean those Quakers who are then discerning are reliant on the information that they're given.
And also, the most topics
Mm-hmm.
require more work,
Yeah.
which will be done by people
Mm-hmm.
not at the yearly meeting.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
of it will be in committee, but a lot of it, I think, I would hate to ask right now. I think right now, the staff on the whole know more about any of the work that we do than any of the committees
Mm-hmm.
do.
Right.
And that has been a big shift, certainly since the 1980s. And that's been an unspoken shift. I don't think we've ever really focused on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. So, I was going to say, I mean, you do also bring in examples in your thesis of, say, um, the lease and sale of Courtauld House,
Mm-hmm.
which was before the big, charity law.
Yes.
So this has been a trend that you've seen, that you're noting over a series of decades, in a sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So anyone can read your thesis, which is lovely. They just need to Google Penelope Cummins e-theses, and there you are. You pop up immediately, which is wonderful. The impact of secularization on British Quaker ecclesiology. So yeah, I would recommend people to have a look at that. Maybe we can just go back to a bit of the process. So, I mean, one of the things is that you say you live 50 miles from London. I mean, but also you're not close to Birmingham.
Mm.
So how was it kind of working at at a university that was, quite a way away? Is that
Well,
Did it work for you?
I hadn't it was an idyllic period for me because
Mm,
Woodbrooke was still there.
yes.
And before I started the thesis, I'd started serving as a friend in residence, which is a task that I greatly enjoyed and which gave me access any time of day or
Mm,
night at that stage to the library at
mhm,
Woodbrooke. And so I was able to do a lot of my research from in the Quaker
right.
library. And I also live near Cambridge University Library, which is one of the national deposit libraries that anyone can use.
Mm-hmm.
I think I pay £10 a year for that.
Mm, lovely.
And I was able to time, well, thanks to you, we were able to time a lot of our supervision meetings while I
Mhm.
was at work as well. And because the supervision was mostly in the days where we would have otherwise telephoned rather than
Yes,
chatted face to face.
sure.
And and the other advantage that I had was that there are meal times at Woodbrooke, and people come for a lot of different courses and a lot of different purposes. Committees meet there, all sorts met there. And so, although I explicitly said I wasn't interviewing, I certainly was able to test a lot of what I was saying and thinking
Mm-hmm.
through conversation, and people would remind me of incidents or whatever. And that was incredibly helpful
Mm.
um, and a lot of fun.
Yes, very good. I was going to ask you about the data collection because, at the moment, all the sufferings papers are online and the minutes are available, and, there's a fair degree of transparency about the minutes and the papers. But you were looking at a period where that wasn't the case. And
Well,
were you able to access the things you needed or wanted to look at?
mostly. Um, thing is, the system at the moment is one which is instituted in the 1960s in line with the British government, which said at that stage, the British government said, right, we're going to have a 50-year embargo
Mm.
on any minutes and documentation.
Hmm.
And so that's what the Society of Friends still has. The British government has gone down to 25 years, and we've never challenged or changed that. So minutes are recent minutes are online for 2 years. If you want to look beyond that,
Right.
you can't.
Hmm.
Um, but I was researching the current, you know, during a period where things were happening each year.
Yes.
But looking back, I was relying on other sources of documentation. The friend in those, well, up to about 20 years ago, perhaps, maybe a bit later, gave much more thorough coverage to sufferings and yearly meeting matters than it has done during different periods since then. And then also, so those were the actual reports of those gatherings. But then there would be letters and comments from people also in the Friend and in other Quaker journals. And occasionally it got as far as an item would get as far as being in another publication, in a book.
Yes.
So I decided that I was specifically only going to look at material that anyone else could follow my footsteps and look at. And so that's what happened. And it was pretty copious, because the thing, too, is that minutes, certainly Quaker minutes, are written very discreetly.
Yes.
And if there was an absolute Barney, you never really get it, do you?
No.
So a lot of the more interesting material is on the letters page rather than in the minutes.
Was it not tempting to think, oh, I could just interview these past clerks, or these kind of people who'd had key roles in, say, with yearly meeting trustees, or going into the recording clerks over that period? Or,
well,
I mean, just made an interesting comment that you wanted everyone to be able to follow you. I mean, that's which of course isn't the case with interview data, that people then rely on the researcher having done their interviews well, that created a good sample, and having sifted fairly through the material.
Well, the other thing that is absolutely terrible, but it's true. By the time I started the thesis, there were enough key people who knew that I disagreed with them.
Okay.
And so it wouldn't, some people may or may not have agreed to be interviewed, but there can be quite a deep trust between the interviewer and the interviewee. And I wouldn't have gotten that across the spectrum. Would have got it from some people, but not.
Yes.
But I was more interested in what was objectively available than in people's perceptions.
Yes, no, that's good. And you talked a little bit before about, not, it's not about individuals. So it's not about highlighting somebody's bad memory or.
Absolutely, it's very much structural stuff.
Sure.
Happening, and that we were all part of. It just rolled on, as it were, and we were all actors in different parts of this.
So I think in that sense, this was a wise decision, just to say, I'm going to stick with the printed material, and
Well, I had to defend that, both to you and also at the end of your first year of research, or for a part-time, or your second year, you have to submit things to piece of work to the university, and that was a Viva panel, and I had to defend that decision to them as well, and it was good that they checked.
Yes.
But I did point out that it would have been a different thesis. It would have been fine. It would have been a perfectly good thesis to have done. It just wasn't this thesis.
Sure. Did it come up in your final Viva, the PhD Viva?
No.
No, okay. So
not that I remember.
No, because you'd obviously made such a good case in your thesis as to why you were doing it. Good, lovely. So, I mean, one of those things about I suppose, preparing the thesis for for examination is to try to preempt what you think the examiners might pick up on. And so, I remember us having conversations about, being an insider and being an insider with a known view, and then deciding only to use, the minutes and records and things like that. So, yeah, but no, good. So you meant right at the beginning, you said you honed your skills of procrastination. Um, Now, I mean, part of the reason that, I mean, a PhD takes so long though is that the thinking time is so crucial. So I mean, someone could write 80,000 words in 80 hours if they were on a roll and just, doing it without any footnotes and anything like that. But to make an original contribution to knowledge to the academy, you know, I, I suppose I'm pushing back on the idea of procrastination and thinking, well, what about analysis and just sitting with it? I mean, it wasn't that you kind of put it on one side for a year or two. I'm sure you were you immersed in it.
Well, particularly when it came to final writing up, boy, did I have a clean kitchen, tidy drawers,
Okay.
well-kept garden,
Okay. Okay.
anything except sitting at the desk. But I did read something really helpful to the effect that Graham Greene wrote 800 words a day.
Mm,
Now, what he did was he only wrote 800 words a day, but he wrote them every day.
okay. Yes.
And so when I was having a really, really bad day or week
Mm,
in the final writing up, I would say to myself, okay, I only have to do 800
yeah.
words. And then I would write a long chatty email of about 1,200 words
Hmm.
to a friend complaining about it. That was easy.
Ah, ah,
But but I think one has to not underestimate how difficult writing is. I've earned my living all my life through writing. And and it was just the last couple of months of this were harder than any writing I've ever done, partly because it mattered to me far more than anything else.
okay.
Um, but also, I was quite alarmed at one stage where I was chatting with one of my colleagues who said, "Oh, I've done 5 years of research now, I've got everything ready, and now I'm going to start writing." And I kind of went pale
Mm,
because I really, really hoped that they had done some writing in between.
mhm.
Um, it's great fun doing one's research. And I love going into a library and thinking, okay, what are the half a dozen books that I'm going to read in the next couple of days on this particular topic?
Mhm.
And finding them and piling them around me and starting
Mhm.
to work out which bits of them are relevant to what I'm trying to say. That's lovely. But you can do that and do that and do that and never do the synthesizing.
Mm, mhm.
And then it's really very late to do it in your final round. I think you talk about 80,000 words in
Mm,
80 days or 80 hours or whatever. I think that's absolutely great. That people should just be doing that at different intervals. Um, when one master's that I did was in town planning, and we were given a book, planning document to read, take home for the weekend, dribble over. And then on the Monday, we were told, discuss under exam conditions. Sometimes we were told discuss with relation to transport or sewage or whatever. Sometimes it was just discuss. And you had to pull from all the bits of your mind, and you had 1 or 2 days to do that writing. And you sat there concentrating and your pen flying. And I really recommend that one just sometimes does that without access, without access to one's notes, without saying, all right, let me rephrase this. Just writing.
Yes.
And then once you've done it, it's there in a pile for you to make use of afterwards. Also, giving conference papers is incredibly useful. You then require your students to present once a year to their colleagues.
Yeah.
But also, if you're whatever your topic is, there are other people who are not part of the Quaker Studies group who are probably fascinated by something that is very adjacent to your topic. And so it may be a history conference, it may be a sociology of religion conference, it may be a linguistics conference, but that's where you will also find some of your pack. And you may also find your examiner there as well. And if you're cunning, which I'm often not, your conference papers will then be parts of chapters or become parts of chapters. So that's another way of getting a bit of the work tidy.
Yes, no, good. And I remember you came on a writing retreat, one of the Woodbrooke writing retreats, and I found that helpful. Yeah.
That was that again. I mean, that was 5 days of writing, and everyone who was on that retreat had this. They were also sitting at their desks and coming together at meals, saying, "Gosh, I hardly did anything," and that's great. There was a solidarity of that, and when you're at that writing stage, you really do need a bit of solidarity.
Yes, yeah. So we're doing that again next March at Glenthorne this time. So that'd be just let everyone know. So it's nice. Good. So did you, I mean, as someone who, worked as a writer in other forms, was it a bit of a surprise that the writing of the PhD was actually quite tricky or created anxiety or displacement activity? I mean, had you earlier on, did you think, oh yeah, well, I'll get to the writing and I'll be able to do that bit because I'm a proven writer?
No.
Right. Okay.
I know that writing is difficult, and if you care about it, it's more difficult. And also, there's this fantastic thing of imposter syndrome, and who am I to think I've actually got something to say about this topic? That was a tricky one.
So, okay, so one tip is just regular writing and just, to keep up the practice of writing. And obviously to seek out colleagueship. So we have the student days, 2 or 3 times a year. You're now convening the Quaker Studies Research Association, and we have the joint conference. So all of these moments are really crucial, I suppose, in terms of networking and not feeling alone, having the possibility to present. Yeah.
I think the student days are terrific. They are, or were in my day, 3 times a year. And in my day, we all came together. There were a couple of people who were really long distance, United States or wherever, and it was wild excitement the days we saw them on screen. But it's just great because when you're new to it, you meet people who are further ahead, and they're wrestling with different aspects of the process. And also you get to hear, at least once a year, something about the progress of their work. And so you become very interested in their topic as well. I know and care a lot about post-war reconstruction in northern Norway. And I think I'll always remember one colleague who was writing a biographical piece, who stood with a huge smile on her face one day and said, "Let me tell you about the man I love." And we would ask, "And how is he?" And she would say, "Oh, he's up a mountain in Switzerland at the moment," or just started a new job in Manchester. And that was tremendous. It did help us all, and each person contributed by their presence. So yeah, to people embarking on this kind of work, I really do recommend that the student days are a joy, rather than something. Obviously, sometimes one has to do it on Zoom, but when you can see your colleagues, it's just so nice.
Are there anything else you'd like to, any other tips for would-be PhD students? I mean, you've offered quite a lot there, actually. So anything else reflecting back that you'd comment on?
Two things. Having said that, I've got to remember what the second one is. One, well, it's topic and supervisor. I wouldn't. There are a lot of people under whom I wouldn't have completed my dissertation. I don't do very well if I'm dealing with someone who's competitive with me, mentally competitive. And some people are. Some people have to be right. And I would have just shriveled. And in fact, again, going back to master's days, I changed my research topic on one occasion because of the supervisor who I would have been allocated.
Right.
From how they choose to the location of a supermarket, it became an analysis of the legislation associated with historical buildings. So we're talking about very, very different topics. But for me, it was worth it because it would have been a horrible slog under the first putative supervisor. So you have to have a supervisor you trust and preferably like. And I was very fortunate with you, Ben, not just because of what a delightful personality you may or may not have, but you also have a very good memory of a lot of the events that I was covering. And you were able to look beadily at me and say, that's not quite accurate, Penelope.
Okay.
That was very good. So that's a big thing. And then the topic. I think that if one is embarking on what is going to be a long period, whether it's 3 years or 6 years or whatever, it's got to be something that you either are fascinated about or can become fascinated about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people feel obliged to choose their topic before they actually know how much has or hasn't been written in the more general field.
Right.
And for instance, it's only as I've hung around for a long time around Quaker studies that I've realized that there are whole centuries that are under researched.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just what fascinating aspect of Margaret Bell or the Valiant 60 or whatever might one come up with. But if you look at 18th century Quakers and probably quite a lot of early 20th century Quakers doing anything, it's under researched.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really recommend that people just ask and ask. About where there are gaps and what might be fascinating.
Yes.
And actually sometimes attending conferences before you choose, if that's at all possible, can be helpful as well, again, because there are more people to ask and to learn what hasn't been written.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. Good. And I mean, some people do start and then modify their topic or change slightly, or but it's all time, and the more I suppose you can come with a clear focus. And of course, part of the really important part of the application process is a research proposal. Not that you're held to it, but there's quite a lot of work goes into it, and so
Huge
yeah,
amount.
the more prepared you are, the better. Yeah, good. So I'm hoping very much that you're going to keep publishing and disseminating, and we can look forward to that. As I say, people can find your thesis easily, and hopefully they will engage with it because what you've been dealing with is very current and ongoing. So, which is not true of a lot of PhDs. And so I think you've offered us all something here for us to continue to think about, Penelope. So, thank you so much. Sorry, have you any
I just want to
final?
say that it was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Okay, good.
And
That's important. Yes.
actually, if anyone is starting on this, you might be doing a PhD to further your career, but whether you are or not, I think the only way to do it is to enjoy it.
Mm.
And because you've got to give it quite a lot of time, it has to be the time that you think is the right time. It's my me time, as it were.
Yes.
It's my indulgence.
Mm.
Um, could spend Saturday morning polishing up my Porsche if I had a Porsche,
Yes.
or I could spend it just looking up another couple of things.
Lovely.
And so that's the way one has to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to want to enjoy the time you're spending.
Yeah. No, that's really important. Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, it's a major commitment, and ideally it will start fun and stay fun. So, good. Well, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Penelope. It's been lovely to see you again and to have this conversation. And I trust and look forward to when our paths cross again.